Welcome to Total Retail Talks, your podcast channel for retail knowledge.
Hello and welcome to episode 180 of Total Retail Talks. In today's episode, Executive Editor Joe Keenan sits down with David Dancer, the Chief Marketing Officer at MedMen, a premium marijuana dispensary with locations in California, Nevada, and New York. Listen in as they discuss David's role at MedMen and the growth of cannabis as a retail category. And now, on to the show.
Thanks for joining me, David.
Hey, Joe. Thanks for having me.
So I think a good place to start would be to have you briefly tell us a little bit about your career in the retail industry, your background in retail, and then kind of take us up to today, why you were interested in joining MedMen.
Yeah, sure. It's definitely one of the first questions that I typically receive. So my background is grounded in loyalty and partnership marketing, brand marketing. I started my career in telecommunications, working on the partnership side of the business with MCI, and then spent a good chunk of my career within financial services, American Express, Visa, and Charles Schwab, and most recently was in the flower business, a different kind of flower, at Teleflora, a floral delivery company. And so when I was approached by MedMen, they were interested in my experience working in a regulated industry. So the banking industry, obviously very regulated, and navigating that regulatory environment to create effective marketing is certainly a challenge and a skill set that I had accumulated over my time in that category. And then also, while at Charles Schwab, I worked on the retail network and managed the marketing in those retail outlets, as well as the experience in those outlets. And MedMen being a traditional brick and mortar retailer for the time being, that was certainly relevant as well. And then finally, my experience at Teleflora, really a pure play e-commerce company with also a network of stores that are owned and operated by member florists of the Teleflora network. So that experience of digital, branding, retail, all were really relevant as they were looking at me to come on board, because the company is experiencing explosive growth. So I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about where MedMen is going. But when I was approached by MedMen, I certainly saw an alignment of my skills, but then also I really saw the work that had been put into play already with a commitment to the retail experience and changing the retail experience within the cannabis industry. I also saw a real commitment to brand integrity, and to marketing. Before I was here, the first cannabis marketing campaign was launched by MedMen earlier in 2018. And so the company already had a commitment to it, and there was just this enormous opportunity as states continue to legalize, as MedMen continues to obtain licenses and secure the opportunity to be able to expand retail locations. It was just really an exciting opportunity for me. The cannabis piece, I am fairly new to cannabis myself, but the health and wellness benefits of cannabis and the opportunity to market a product where there's just so much demand and so much interest, but so much opportunity around education and being able to present MedMen and all of the cannabis products that we sell to consumers was really exciting. I met with the owners, Adam and Andrew, and really saw their vision and was behind that vision and knew that they were really transforming the organization. And it was really a unique opportunity, not only from that industry perspective, but to join MedMen, who's the leader in the space, and to be able to be the lead of the marketing organization was exciting. So I've been here just a little bit over 5 months.
Great. Well, so, quite a varied background for you, from, traditional retail, through digital commerce at Teleflora and financial services, and now at MedMen. So we've kind of gotten up to speed a little bit about your background. Maybe I think the next step would be to tell our audience briefly about MedMen and kind of, you mentioned kind of the story of where you're at and where you're at today, but also a little bit about, how the company was brought to that point.
Yeah, sure. So Adam Bierman, who is now the CEO of the organization, as well as Andrew Moglen, who's the president of the organization, are the two founders. And so about 8 years ago, the two of them really saw an opportunity to create a retail experience for cannabis here in California, while it was a medical approved state only at that time, but to change the way that consumers could purchase cannabis. And again, at that time, sort of patients could purchase cannabis. Many dispensaries in California at the time and in other states were in a dark alley, had frosted glass, had bars on the window. You walked in and unlike traditional retail, you sort of waited in a line and gave your order at the counter and quickly sort of left with a brown bag of product. And so there was a real opportunity to begin to change the dialogue and to begin to fight the stereotypes around cannabis. And so early in their founding of the company, they opened a dispensary and really started to establish this differentiated experience that we have as a retailer. From the street, you have easy viewing into the store. They're brightly lit. There are tables that display product so that you can learn and understand more. There are iPads there. So that's evolved over time into what the stores look like today. But Adam and Andrew had a vision of not only differentiating that retail experience, but also leading and transforming the conversation and the dialogue around cannabis, and essentially helping to establish this cannabis economy. And so today we operate, as you mentioned earlier, we operate in California and Nevada, which are adult use states, and we also operate in New York, which is a medical state. We have plans to expand to many new states. Even this year, we'll be expanding into Arizona, next year into Florida. And as many folks who follow the cannabis industry may know, we also have acquired PharmaCann, which is a medical cannabis dispensary organization that has several outlets in multiple states, mostly on the East Coast. So we will go from roughly 15 stores where we are today to well over 66 stores just within the next year. The retail expansion is significant.
So you briefly described MedMen as, and you used a traditional brick and mortar retailer, which is interesting. So that's a good segue into my next question around, your experience in retail. How does that kind of transition you to your current role at MedMen? And I guess that's kind of one of the reasons why they recruited you and why you thought it would be potentially a good fit for you.
Yeah, I think what is at the core of what we do is, again, it's going back to this customer experience. And so with cannabis being quite unique, because people are seeking education, they are uneasy and unsure about how to purchase. One of the pieces of not only the marketing strategy, but also our retail operations strategy is a constant focus on the customer experience. So as you mentioned, I did start to talk a little bit about the store and the differences in the store, and there's many more elements that go into that, ranging from highly skilled and trained sales associates, integration of technology into the retail footprint to allow customers to explore. Because what we find is folks come into the store and they're looking for education on cannabis. They're looking for product uses and the effects that those products will deliver to them. And then they're also obviously looking for a traditional retail experience. Our stores, another strategy of ours, is they're located in places where you and I shop today. So we have a store on Robertson Boulevard in Beverly Hills, on Abbot Kinney in Venice Beach, California, on Fifth Avenue in New York City. So again, it's this constant focus that we have to create this experience that's much like other retail experience that you may have on running your normal errands, going to the grocery store, the dry cleaner, and stopping by MedMen on your way back home. So a lot of the traditional sort of retail tactics from a experience perspective certainly are used, as well as retail marketing tactics, because we're really transforming that retail experience of cannabis purchasing to be as similar and or differentiated as we can from a typical retail experience.
Yeah, kind of taking the taboo away from the experience as well, and kind of that stigma.
That's right.
So let's take more of a kind of a big picture view here with this question in terms of, not just specifically to MedMen, although that certainly, as a leader in the space fits into this, but where do you kind of see the future of cannabis as an industry? And I'm specifically interested in retail distribution and kind of, as the product becomes legalized in more and more states, and there's kind of growing momentum, in a lot of states to legalize it. What are your thoughts on kind of where we're headed in terms of cannabis as a retail category?
Yeah, it's a good question, because as a retailer, I think one of the other nuances that's really interesting for people to understand is we need to either grow our own product in the states that we operate, or we need to purchase product that's grown in the state from other organizations. So in every state in California, you need to be selling product that is grown and cultivated in California. So it's a very different approach, obviously, where companies centralize distribution centers,
right,
manufacturing facilities. And so every state, you need to have operations. We will have operations of our own. We are actually launching and have launched our own product line in the state of Nevada, and it's called State Made. So I think, to your question, though, that's a complication, and I think it certainly is capital intensive to be able to cultivate, grow, and manufacture your own product for your retail locations in each state. But I think as we move forward, what we're seeing is consolidation, companies merging together. I think you're going to see the legitimacy of retail is going to continue to evolve. I think certainly I like to think that it's led by MedMen and how we operate. But I think in some states, regulations differ. There are more licenses in certain states. The regulations are different in certain states. And I think those are going to become more standardized as we continue to move forward. And I think there'll be consolidation in the industry. And I think the industry as a whole will be legitimized. And, these regulatory organizations in each state are going to have funding from all of the excise taxes that we're paying to monitor and to manage and to ensure that cannabis retail is much like other retail in all of the states.
That's interesting. You kind of brought up that challenge, and I hadn't thought about it. So essentially, you could be, running 50 different the complexity of, 50 different supply chains in 50 different states. So it's something to think about.
Right. That's right.
So kind of on the marketing side then, obviously your role as CMO, what are the challenges that you've come across, and, maybe not challenges, but the differences that you've kind of been confronted with as you look to market and grow MedMen?
Yeah. That when I mentioned earlier, having navigated banking and financial services compliance and regulatory restrictions, let's keep in mind, again, most of those are at the federal level. So there's typically one set of rules. And as we talked about, this cultivation and this unique challenge you have with product needs to be grown within each state, the regulations for marketing are also managed at the state level, sometimes at the county level. And so every single state we operate and every single county and location that we have, there is a different set of rules, and there's a different way that we have to go about getting approval. So as an example, in the state of Nevada, anything that we do to market our stores or the products that we sell, we need to actually submit to the state of Nevada 30 days before the marketing collateral or the marketing materials go live. So obviously today, with digital marketing being one of our channels that we use to communicate and to our customers and to acquire, a 30-day approval window is something that really requires us to have different processes in place to be more efficient and more effective. The other piece that's, I think, even more restrictive for us and more of a challenge is that traditional media is not available to us. So in prior careers and positions that I had, hey, we have a $500,000 budget. Here is our target demo. media buyer, go see what you can buy and optimize to optimize our return. Here, just as an example, we're not able to advertise via Google AdWords. We're not able to promote posts on Facebook or Instagram. And other traditional media outlets, let's use out of home, for example, it comes with a series of regulations and restrictions. Billboards can't be within a certain amount of feet of a school or a rehabilitation facility. And so we really have to navigate and use our relationships as well as educate. So we're spending a lot of time sitting down with publishers and media outlets and educating them on cannabis and the state of cannabis and where cannabis is going from a legalization perspective. We need to educate them on MedMen and our premium retail experience. And then we also share with them all of our creative and our messaging, which we think is credible and honest and transparent. And so we're opening a lot of the doors for cannabis advertisers to be able to secure space and to be able to market their products. So it's a very complex sort of network out there of what we can and can't do. And so we are really focusing on building those relationships and getting out there and testing and learning and seeing where we can optimize to ultimately drive the brand and drive traffic in the stores.
I guess with the silver lining in that kind of regulation on you mentioned all the way down to a county level within a state is that you really then, I would imagine, you've honed that messaging and you're targeting the messaging and you're kind of getting that personalization and aspect to it. Is since you really know who you're speaking to, if you're breaking it down on a basis where you're going to such a small segment of the population.
Yeah, that's right. I think, a lot of, sort of to translate that, I'm typically will refer to, we do a lot of hyper local marketing, as you're referring to it. So, we find coming from some of the other brands I've mentioned where we're using primarily TV and digital, here we find great success in out-of-home billboards that surround our stores and our local geographies. We also, as a really specific example, in Las Vegas, there are restrictions for us. We cannot market on the Strip. We cannot market in airports. We cannot market in hotels, in casinos. And so these restrictions are really tough to work around. However, we were able to advertise on taxi cabs. And so we have 150 taxi cabs wrapped in Las Vegas that allow us to get exposure to that really important tourist who is looking to many times come to Las Vegas, certainly for fun and entertainment and a lot of other things that Las Vegas has to offer. But many of these tourists also live in states where they can't purchase cannabis and they want to go have an experience that they feel is, again, safe, approachable. They can get information and insights. So we really do have to go in and try some of these tactics that I think other more developed industries and brands may look at as maybe traditional or older tactics, but they're really performing for us. And we're seeing in the store, word of mouth is our number one source of how customers have heard about us. So certainly there is, again, that conversation that's out there about cannabis. Someone comes and has a great experience and they're going to bring a friend back or refer a friend to the store. But right after that, our out-of-home efforts are really performing well for us.
And how about digitally? You mentioned, paid search is, not possible right now. What about, besides out-of-home, what about some of the digital channels?
Yeah. So we are in the midst of just early September. We launched when we opened a new store in Las Vegas early October. In early September, we launched digital advertising. So we are doing programmatic and targeted and geo-fenced advertising digitally. We actually this week are taking a look at all of those results, but we are seeing, especially on those ads that are geo-fenced, so meaning our store is south of the Strip, a few blocks off the Strip. We're able to target visitors and residents who are either in locations that like hotels and casinos and or events and otherwise, and we're seeing traffic because we can track that traffic into the store. We're seeing traffic from that. So we're going to continue to learn more, and we're going to continue to optimize, but we are seeing effectiveness there. We certainly focus, because of the limitation on AdWords, we certainly spend quite a bit of time focusing on optimizing SEO. And just recently, in the last 2 weeks, we have a magazine that we publish called Ember, and we've just created a new portal that can be found on MedMen.com called Ember. You'll see it in the top nav of the site. And we're creating a content portal. And so it's really important to us, again, people seeking information on cannabis in general and also seeking a place to go purchase. We are focusing our efforts on content creation and content integration across other publishers as well to ensure that we can optimize SEO.
And then my final question, David, is, looking at kind of the growth strategy for MedMen. Obviously, you mentioned when you joined the company, it was kind of this explosive growth that was happening. And that was only 5 months ago. So, it's still in place today. How do you see marketing and what you can do within your team to help continue that positive momentum and growth?
Yeah. I think number one, there's a freshness to the data, right? I mean, adult use became legal in California in January of 2018. So number one, we are spending a lot of time analyzing and understanding who our customer is. And we're seeing that our customer varies greatly by retail location, by neighborhood, by geography. So one is making sure that we understand who our customer is so we can refine, as I mentioned before, we can refine some of the tactics that we're using to reach those customers. Number two, we're also doing research, quant research, consumer research, to understand the attitudes and the behaviors of cannabis potential users and users. There's a real lack of data in this industry because of, again, the fragmentation of legalization across the state. So we've invested in a pretty significant study that we'll be getting back later this month, or next month rather, and we're going to be refining our own brand positioning and our targeting. So one is to ensure we know who our customer is, how we can talk to that customer, how we can create the right experience for that customer. But I think the other piece of how my team is going to help in the success and the growth of the company is getting back to that hyper local. I'm going to be hiring actually field marketing teams and brand ambassador teams to be in these states and these locations where our stores are opening. So we are seeing a lot of effectiveness with that type of work here in Southern California, and we'll be expanding that. So making sure we have feet on the ground, that we're becoming a great partner in the community. When we open up on streets like Robertson Boulevard and Abbot Kinney, it's a shock to some of the merchants on that street. So we have a lot of work to do to continue to legitimize what we do, to be a great merchant partner, but also to reach the consumers that live in and around those areas. So we really need to make sure we're on the ground and we're actively building those relationships as we go forward.
Great. Well, I think I'm just about out of time for now, but I want to take this opportunity to thank David Dancer of MedMen for joining me today, telling us a little bit about the company and kind of the growth of the cannabis industry. Please check out our podcast channel page, mytotalretail.com/podcasts for show notes. Total Retail Talks is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Stitcher. But make sure to subscribe on our podcast channel page as well. Thanks, and I look forward to you joining us on the next episode of Total Retail Talks.